Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the April 2019 edition of Esri's Law Enforcement Webinar Series. I'm Chris Delaney, Esri's Law Enforcement Technical Lead, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, where we'll take a look at building interactive real-time web dashboards using Esri's Operations Dashboard for ArcGIS app. And we'll see how Jacksonville Sheriff's Office uses this technology to enable decision support across several key agency missions. So to get started, I want to kind of review some of the things that we'll be covering in the webinar today. First, I'll be providing a brief overview of the operations dashboard for ArcGIS app. We'll show you some example dashboards and how they work, and then I'll do a live demonstration of what it's like to configure a dashboard using the app. From there, I'll turn it over to Rad Silwick of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, who will be presenting some of the dashboards that they've built to support a variety of missions at JSO. We'll provide some resources for you on how to get started with Operations Dashboard, and if we have some time, we'll reserve some time for your questions about Operations Dashboard. So let's get started. If you're not familiar with our Operations Dashboard for ArcGIS, it is the ArcGIS platform's out-of-the-box web application for authoring and viewing dashboards using maps and location data that live within the ArcGIS platform. Operations Dashboard includes ready-to-use elements like lists, serial charts, pie charts, indicators for counting or calculating percent change, gauges, the ability to show details of items on a map, or the ability to even build in embedded content from other websites, and the ability to perform interaction across all of those different elements in your dashboard, so that clicking on a feature in a list can zoom and pan the map and trigger a pop-up, or that by clicking a bar on a bar chart can filter the map and filter other elements in your dashboard, or that you can set up selectors like the ones you see in this example that can filter by crime type or by the number of days worth of crime shown in the dashboard. Operations Dashboard also includes styling and layout controls so that elements in the dashboard can be grouped together or can be stacked on top of one another, or can be styled to fit a aesthetic scheme and color scheme that fits your branding of your organization. As I mentioned before, Operations Dashboard comes with WebGIS, Esri's WebGIS capabilities. So that means ArcGIS Online if you're using our software as a service in the public cloud, or if you're using our service technology, server technology, Operations Dashboard comes with ArcGIS Enterprise for on-premise deployments. In either condition, you need a level 2 named user license, or it's also known as a creator license, to build dashboards. But for people who want to use the dashboards that you create, they can either be level 1 named users in your organization, or you also have the ability in ArcGIS Online to share dashboards with the public, and in ArcGIS Enterprise to share them anonymously inside of your network without requiring any kind of logon or named user access. Operations Dashboard also can support building dashboards for a variety of devices, as it's a responsive web application. So you can design dashboards not only for large video walls that cut across multiple screens or desktops, but also tablets and mobile devices. The power of dashboards in the ArcGIS platform is that they're a mechanism to combine a variety of different data sources into one single point to support decision making. And that can be from all sorts of different sources, real-time data sources coming from ArcGIS apps being used in the field by officers or first responders, things like Collector for ArcGIS or Survey 123, where officers in the field are capturing data in real time, and that data is going into your map portal, ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, and then available in real time for users of your dashboard to see. It also can consume data coming from a GeoEvent server, the capability in ArcGIS Enterprise that enables the use of real-time streaming feeds of data, like AVL or GPS tracks, real-time calls for service data, or consumption of social media or other data sets that are accessible via API, and pushing them into features in a map that can be viewed in real time on a dashboard. That can in turn be overlaid with any operational plan information or jurisdictional boundary data that you have in your map portal. That further can be enriched with content that Esri provides and the larger GIS community provides, whether that's some of the real-time traffic capability that Esri provides, or weather data from the GIS community, or critical infrastructure data such as is available through Department of Homeland Security's Highfeld website. And all this data comes together in dashboards, and the dashboards can serve a variety of different purposes. They can be built in such a way where the purpose is for a user to interact directly with them with filters and interactive elements, or they can just be intended to sit passively on a video wall or on a screen so that key information is available at a glance to users as they pass by the dashboard. So Operations Dashboard really represents our flagship tool for building dashboards. But when we say dashboard in the ArcGIS platform, what does a dashboard mean? A dashboard really to us, because everything at Esri is about location, really includes some kind of map or spatial context, which differentiates it from other kinds of dashboards and other types of technology platforms where a map may not necessarily be part of the dashboard. So in that context, when you think about sort of how building maps and dashboards at the simplest level, a web map is a way to display data in a spatial context. Web App Builder for ArcGIS has a dashboard theme if you've used this before, and that may cause confusion relative to Operations Dashboard. But that theme is really just a way to display multiple widgets in Web App Builder in a single display. Doesn't really have the full functionality that you would expect for interactivity and styling capabilities that Operations Dashboard offers. So when it comes to building kind of fully featured dashboards in the ArcGIS platform, Operations Dashboard is really the tool to use. There are some other tools that have similar looks and feel to dashboards in the ArcGIS platform, such as Insights for ArcGIS that enables you to create analytical information products that have some interactivity between charts and maps, and our plugin for Power BI. The difference with the plugin for Power BI is that's really Microsoft's main dashboarding platform that we're adding capability to from an Esri perspective, but it's really oriented for data in the Microsoft world. Operations Dashboard is oriented for data in the Esri world. So now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a few examples that we see for use patterns in law enforcement. And we really end up seeing three main patterns. The first is around operational management. So in live calls for service or tracking AVL feeds. And then a variant of that, which is managing events, whether that's sporting events or other kinds of community festivals or parades, or unplanned events like protests, being able to take an operational plan, combine real-time data, and have that up in the command center so that an incident commander can track and make decisions on the fly as the event unfolds. And then executive summaries for performance metrics. So think CompStat dashboards or other kinds of executive dashboards where we're able to track performance. And here's a couple of quick examples of that. This is an example calls for service dashboard where I've got real-time feeds of call data coming in. You can see the new calls as they come in. You can see the status of the call where calls are waiting to be dispatched, or officers are en route, or officers are working calls on scene. And I can also, as I zoom in, I have camera feeds available here as well. So I can zoom in and I can see camera feeds. The camera feed is shown down here and it toggles to reflect the view of that camera in a particular area. All of that real-time data is being fed through GeoEvent server coming directly from the CAD system. The second example is that event dashboard kind of context. This is an example for the DC Marathon. Again, we've got live calls coming in, and we've got some vehicle units that we're tracking in and around here. And in addition, we have some suspicious activity reports that are being captured by officers in the field, where they're able to report a little bit of information and pass along things like photos of suspicious activities or objects that they've seen in the field using either Survey 123 or Collector. And in addition, this particular dashboard is also consuming things like the real-time traffic feed to visualize traffic conditions in and around the marathon route, or weather conditions across the United States and their potential impacts on that event. And lastly, an example of an executive summary style dashboard. This is a dashboard that you might be using to evaluate various proactive patrol missions as part of a crime reduction strategy. I can see at a high level a variety of KPIs, 28-day, 6-month, year-to-year, percent change metrics. I can see a kind of goal against proactive patrol times in target areas. And I have all of the currently active missions in my area. And so I can click on one of these missions, and as I click on the mission, the map zooms in, it filters all of the data to the spatial extent of where this particular mission is occurring. I can see the details of what's going on. This is a retaliatory shooting, response plan activities, all of my key metrics changed in real time. And then if I further wanted to filter by a particular crime type, I have the ability to do that too. So if I wanted to filter by burglaries, I can see that all of those metrics change to reflect just burglaries, and all of my charts change to reflect that as well. So these example apps illustrate how you can configure the dashboard in a variety of different ways with any number of different layouts and elements, and that those elements can interact with one another to achieve delivering information that's relevant to your audience and decision maker. And the best news is that building a dashboard, once you've got your data organized, is actually as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 being picking the elements that you need to tell your story in the dashboard, deciding how you want those elements to interact with one another, and then how you want your layout to look in the style of your dashboard. So let's take a few minutes now and show you how you'd go about building a dashboard. So to do that, I'm going to hop into an example web mapping application, or a web map that I've built. I've taken some data on fatal and non-fatal shootings from the city of Rochester, New York, and I've mapped it in a web map together with the city of Rochester's police beats. This is data that's available on their open data site. And I've created a dashboard out of it that I want to show you some capabilities in, and then we'll try to recreate that dashboard in real time. So using this web map, I created this dashboard. This is a shootings dashboard, and it has a couple of different functionalities. Here you can see the map. Over here you can see a series of pie charts and a serial chart that have breakdowns of the shooting victims by gender, ethnicity, and age. Down here at the bottom, I can see a year-by-year total of shooting victims for each year. If I click on this tab, I can see a year-to-date indicator metric and the last 3 years by month counts of shooting victims. I also have a list of all of the police beats in the city, and I've got some interactivity that's pretty interesting in here. I can select a year or even multiple years by holding down Shift. And as I do that, you can see that the map changes to reflect those years, as do my demographic elements. I also have the ability, if I wanted to, up here on the header of my dashboard, to filter by the individual type of the shooting, fatal or non-fatal. So if I wanted you to look just specifically at homicides, I could do that, and I could see all of the counts have adjusted based on that, as have my demographics. And I'm going to unselect all these historical years, And then if I wanted to, when I go to look at the year-to-date totals, I can see that my year-to-date total for homicide is still filtered for homicide, and I can see the counts by month over the last 3 years. And then if I turn that filter off, it would go back to the original totals overall. So there's a lot of functionality in here. And then the last piece of functionality that's really exciting is if I wanted to get that information for a particular beat or a set of beats, I could simply go to this list and click on a particular beat. As you can see, it filtered the shootings in the map, it zoomed into that particular beat, highlighted it, and then it modified all the elements in the dashboard to filter them just to that particular beat. So I'm able to use this dashboard to answer a lot of questions, whether it's global questions about shooting victims across the entire city, or whether it's areas of the city or even particular beats in the city. And I can get historical data as well as year-to-date data, and I can filter for either fatal or non-fatal shootings. So let's try to take a stab at building this dashboard together, and I'm going to do it in just a few minutes. So I've got my web map, and I'm going to get started building this dashboard. To open up the builder mode of operations dashboard, you need a web map, and that web map, we're going to create that operations dashboard. We're going to go to the top bar here of the web map viewer and press the share button. We're then going to create a web app, and we're going to select the operations dashboard tab in the create a new web app window. And from here, we're going to, I'm just going to call this example map for dashboard webinar Thursday. I already have some tags. I could enter in a summary if I wanted to. And when I press done, it's going to take me to the operations dashboard builder mode. This is where I can now start to build all the elements in my dashboard. And the first element has already been brought in for me, which is my web map element. The first element I'm going to create in this dashboard is a pie chart for the breakdown of victims by gender. So to add an element, I come up to this little plus button up on the upper right-hand side, and I select the element that I'm interested in. I'm going to pick a pie chart. I need to pick the layer that is going to feed the element. So that's my shootings layer. And then I need to pick which field I want to have represent as the categories in the pie chart. So I go to the category field and I select gender. And there you can see the pie chart. Now there's a lot of configuration options in any given element. We're not going to go through each individual piece of functionality today, but I do want to kind of highlight a couple of different things. First, I have a pie chart here. I don't really like the look and the feel of the pie chart. So I'm going to go to the chart configurations options. I'm going to change the inner radius, and that's going to enable me to have a donut chart rather than a pie chart. I'm also going to change the start angle a little bit. I don't like these default colors, so I'm going to go to the slices configuration, and I'm going to change these to match my style for this dashboard, which is going to be a gray and a blue type of style. And then I'm going to give this a name, victims by gender. That's a name for the element, which will be important when I start defining interactivity. And I also want that name represented on the element itself. And there's my pie chart. I press done, and now I have it in my builder mode. And I can come up to the upper left-hand corner of the element, and I can either go back and reconfigure it. That's the gear. I can make a duplicate element. I can delete it, or I can drag it. So I'm going to click and drag. And as I drag it, I can see these different white boxes appear on my screen. And as I mouse over those, it gives me different options to either, on the edges, dock this element, or if I put it here, to stack the element so it would create basically another tab in the same space as the map. I'm going to dock it to the right, then I'm going to pull back this so I put it in the place that I want. I'm going to now make another pie chart. So I'm going to duplicate this pie chart that I made for gender, and I'm just going to reconfigure it to my ethnicity variable. Again, I'll change my colors to better reflect my color scheme. I will give it a name. And there we go. Easy. I can now take this dashboard, drag this over, and I want to group this together with the gender dashboard so that they all behave the same way and are move the same way. To group something together, I hold shift, and as I do that, you can see my area now turns to green, and I'm going to dock it down here at the bottom next to the victims by gender element pie chart. I'm going to save this while I'm ahead, and I'm going to add my last of my demographic elements. So that's going to be a serial chart that's going to show breakdowns of the shooting victims by age group. So in my serial chart, I'm going to select my category field is victim age band, and there I can see the breakdown. That's pretty straightforward. I'm going to change the color to reflect my style and give it a name. Okay, and I'll add some labels on there. So I'll go to series and add some labels. And now I have that, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag and pull this down, hold shift to group, and now I have this whole grouping of demographic related elements for my dashboard. The next thing that I'm going to add in is another serial chart that's going to count my victims by year. So I'll add in another serial chart, select my shootings. My category field is going to be my date field. And there's a cool capability here where by default, it's showing me counts of shooting victims by day, but I can now parse those dates into other date parts. So I could pick month, or in my case, year. So now I'm getting counts by year without having to transform that date field. The transformation is already happening for me using Operations Dashboard. Again, I can add labels, change my color, give it a new title. And voila. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it down to the bottom here, but I don't want to group it because I want it to behave differently than the rest of that grouping area. The next thing that I'm going to add in is a beat layer, a beat list, so a list of all my beats so that I can create that interactivity to filter by the beat. To do that, I'm going to select my list element, and I'm going to select my police beats layer. I want to display all of my police beats, and I'm going to sort them in ascending order by the beat name. And then I'm going to describe how I want each feature in the list to be represented. So I'm going to use some plain text and enter that into this rich text box. So I'm just going to say beat : space, and then I can use this button with the brackets to pick and add in dynamic values from any field in my layer. So now you can see that is what's being shown. I don't actually need that colon, so I'll get rid of that. And now I've created my kind of custom feature name for each individual feature in the list. I'm going to give this a name, beat list, and a title. And I'm good to go. I can now take this and I can pull this over. I can click and drag this over here, where now I've now docked this. And now I'm starting to get a dashboard that looks pretty close to what I showed you as the example dashboard. I got a couple elements left to add, and then we'll do interactivity. So the next element that I'm going to add is a header. This is the title of the dashboard. I'm going to call it Shooting Victims Dashboard. And I can add an icon or a URL to one of your custom graphics if you wanted to. I'm just going to find a police badge and call it a day. There's my new header. And now let's build an indicator widget to be able to calculate year-to-date % change. So to do that, I'm going to use the indicator element. I'm going to select our shootings. And the first thing it's providing, you can see here in the indicator, is a count of all of the records in my shootings layer. But I don't want all of them. I just want the year-to-date. So I need to apply a filter. So I can go here, add plus filter, and I'm going to filter by occurred date. And I'm going to use one of the preset filters that are available in Operations Dashboard. So occurred date is, and hit this drop down, and if I go to the bottom, I can select year to date. So I've had 35 fatal and non-fatal shootings. Now I need a comparison value. What was the previous year to date? I can do this towards the bottom of this section where you can see reference. I'm going to create a reference statistic. And again, I need previous year to date, so I need to filter my data. Right now, this is a count of all my data in my layer. I need to filter by my occurred date is last year, but that gives me all of last year. Now I need just the equivalent last year to date. How do I do that? I press and then I say occurred date is not within the last, is before the last, 365 days. So now I have a value that is last year to date to compare against my current year to date. Now I want to change how this indicator is displayed and show a percent change metric for those two values. To do that, I'll go to the indicator section. I can add a title to the top text, which is year to date. And then you can see I have my current value and my previous value. The current value is listed as value in brackets. I'm going to cut that and paste it down here in the bottom, and then add a little bit of text that says from, and I've got my reference value. So 35 from 28 is my actual counts. And in the middle, I'm going to select this fields button. That's going to give me all the calculations that I could apply to those two values. So I've got percentages, percent change, ratios. I'm going to select percent change, and then I'm going to add in a percent value. And now I have my percent change. And if I want to make sure that I'm enforcing a certain number of digits on that percent change value, I can do that down in the percentage pattern configuration area, and I'll use hash marks to do that. So that will ensure that if I have dragging decimals, it'll show only one digit. From here, I can just give that a name, year to date, and I'm done. And then I can take that and I can drag this over to my victims by year, and I can stack that, and now I can see my indicator. Okay, so we've built all of our elements. Let's save our dashboard, and now let's start to configure some interactivity. The first interactivity that we'd like to configure is where if we click on any of the bars in this bar chart of victims by year, it filters all of our demographic elements. So to do that, I go up to the top corner of this element, I press the configure button, then I go to the actions configuration settings, and you can see it says when selection changes, filter, and then add target. So my targets are going to be those demographic elements, the pie charts. So I want to filter my map, the shootings layer, and I want to filter my victims by gender pie chart, victims by ethnicity pie chart, and victims by age range pie chart. Then I press done. Now I can test it. So I'll select this year, 2015, and hold shift in 2016, 2017, 2018, and you can see all of those widgets changing in real time to reflect my new selection as well as the additional points on the map. So pretty cool, right? Pretty easy to do. The next set of interactivity that I'm going to create is in using my beat list. I'm going to go to that element. I'm going to configure this. And now what I want to happen is I want to have all of my elements in my map react to just the spatial extent of the particular beat that I've selected. So I can select single or multiple beats. I'll select multiple. And then when selection changes, first I want to have control what the map does. So I want to zoom on the map. I want to flash the beat on the map so you can see the extent, and I want to pan to the map. Then I want to set some filters. So I'm going to add another action, the filter action, and I'm going to filter a whole bunch of elements. I want to filter my shootings spatially, so it just shows the shootings that are in the extent of the beat, there are beats that I've selected. I want to filter just so it's only showing that beat. I want to filter my victims by gender element, victims by ethnicity, victims by age range, victims by year, and I even want to filter my year-to-date indicator, both values, the current year and the previous year. So now I've set all of that. Now I can select a particular beat. As I do that, it filtered just for the shootings in that area. It filtered just that beat, and it changed all of my metrics to reflect the counts and the demographic breakdowns for just that area, as well as my year-to-date count. Pretty cool. Now, the last thing that we want to do is create what's called a selector. A selector can live either on a header or on another element called a side panel that'll live on your left-hand side. And that enables you to have kind of more traditional filters, either radio buttons or drop downs that you can utilize to filter any of this stuff. So to build one of those selectors, I'm going to go up to the upper left-hand corner of my header, and I'm going to add a category selector. And the category selector that I want to have for this is a field in my data set that distinguishes between fatal and non-fatal shootings. It's called crime type. I can add a little label that says select shooting type, and then I can set it so that one of the options is none, and that one is the first option in my list of drop-downs, and that is the default selection. So in that way, it's not making a selection until I actively select either homicide or non-fatal shooting. So I can press then from there actions, and that's going to enable me to control what I'm going to filter with that selector. I'm going to filter the map and the shootings layer. I want to filter all of my different elements in my not beat list, all the different elements that involve shootings in my dashboard, and then press done. So now I already had the 213 filter applied, and I can further filter this for just homicides, and you can see that now that changed just for homicides in that particular area. The serial chart was filtered by year, as were the demographic variables. So we've got a dashboard now that almost essentially reflects the dashboard that you saw in the original example, except for one thing. This is a light dashboard. How do we make the dashboard that dark color theme? Well, to do that, there's a gear at the very top in the upper right-hand corner. That gear has controls for things like the dashboard background colors and outline colors and all of that kind of stuff. But the most important one here is theme. And that's where I can change this from dark to light. I can close out, and now I have a dashboard that almost virtually identically resembles the original dashboard that we created. So in about 20 minutes, we went from a web map to a fully functioning dashboard. So that really illustrates how powerful it is to be able to use operations dashboards to take data that you have and turn it into an interactive and a meaningful decision support tool for users in your agency. So with that, I'm now going to turn over the webinar to Rad Silwick. Rad is the Crime Analysis Unit Assistant Administrator and GIS Manager at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And Rad is going to show us some of the work that Jacksonville has been doing in creating and deploying dashboards to serve a variety of key missions in their organization. Rad, thanks for joining us today.
And thank you, Chris. And thank you to the Esri Public Safety team for giving me the opportunity to present some of the cool things that we're doing here in Jacksonville. So I'll take a little bit of a different approach than Chris did. Quickly, I'll do an introduction, talk about my city, about my agency, and then I'll get into what the data looks like before you actually put it into a dashboard. You know, what are the sources of the data and what potential data could you include in a dashboard? It doesn't always have to be real-time data. It could be static data that you're displaying that you may be manually updating, just to give you some ideas of how we're doing that here in Jacksonville. So first things first, this gentleman here, that's not me. That's our sheriff, Mike Williams. And being the sheriff that he is really technology-driven, and he's been, you know, putting this on the forefront as far as how can we leverage technology to help in battling crime here in our city. My background, I've been with the agency for approximately 10 years now. I started as a grant employee, public safety analyst, and the reason why we call ourselves public safety analysts is because we kind of do all sorts of different analyses, from crime analysis to investigative analysis, intelligence analysis, administrative analysis. So all that put together is our public safety analysis platform. From a grant employee, I was promoted into our permanent PSA 1 position, then into a PSA 2, and then eventually into a supervisory role. Now, within the last year or so, I was promoted into the crime analysis unit assistant administrator / GIS manager, because my lovely manager, Sabrika, thought that I could do a fairly good job with this GIS thing. So I've been kind of struggling along and trying to do that for us. So to kind of give you a background of our city in general, and a lot of people don't know that Jacksonville's land area is actually really big, and that creates a lot of challenges for the department to kind of manage where our patrol officers, actually conduct their business, and how to visually display where all this crime is actually happening. So the visual that you're seeing here is, the cities of Boston, Miami, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, DC, Chicago, and Manhattan all put together is how big Jacksonville would actually be. So that creates definitely a lot of managerial, concerns, and how to actually manage those patrol officers being dispatched to calls, and what actual areas they should be patrolling. Jacksonville is also a fairly large city, and a lot of people don't know that Jacksonville as a city is actually the most populous in the state of Florida as well. So we're right in front of Miami, Tampa, and Orlando, with almost 1 million individuals here within our city jurisdiction. We are fourth in the state as far as the metro area. So that's where Miami, Tampa, and Orlando are actually much larger because of the metro areas, all the little cities around those cities that actually exist as well. As far as the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, we're a large agency. We have approximately 3,500 employees, 2,000 of those being sworn. And then the crime analysis unit itself, we're comprised of approximately 20 individuals, myself with a GIS team, and then we have 3 supervisors, and with 4 to 5 analysts that support different roles within the agency. Anything from our patrol functions to investigative to intelligence, like I kind of mentioned before. So talking about considerations before you actually, try to develop your own dashboard. There are a lot of things that you have to consider. Now, Chris talked about how easy it is to develop an actual dashboard, and I agree. It is very easy to go in, actually, into the program once you have a set of data, manipulate it, format it, and actually put a nice looking product out there that that your end users can actually utilize. But there are a lot of considerations that you have to kind of set before you develop any sort of a dashboard. And those are, what is your actual environment? Are you doing this on ArcGIS Online versus your enterprise versus your portal? What actual platform are you going to be using to display this information? And that matters because either you're going to be manually inputting the data, or you're going to have some sort of an automated process where you're updating that data, whether it's every day, every hour, every minute, whatever the case may be. And how do you do that automation? Do you do it through a Python script, or do you already have registered data that you have in a SQL query? So those are a lot of things that you have to consider, and how you actually structure that data to be able to display that information within the dashboard itself. Other things to consider, and Chris kind of touched on it, is, do you want to develop a dashboard, or do you want to develop a web app, or maybe a report in Insights or some other platform? What's the actual end use? Do you want to display a dashboard that's going to be interactive, or something that's just going to be on somebody's TV screen for viewing, or whatever crime statistics or whatever other crime or whatever other data you actually want to display? Other considerations would be, if you're doing this or you're on your enterprise, is your actual infrastructure. How many servers do you have? And I don't mean to get too technical, but those are things that kind of come with time as you start publishing information and you start developing these things. They will take up considerable space on your servers, memory space, and other things that kind of have to be managed and set as you're pushing these things out. So the way I kind of started was just with a set of static data and just playing around and seeing what that looks like. Other things that you have to consider: who's your end audience? Is it going to be patrol? Is it going to be investigations? Is it going to be your command staff, or is it going to be everyone? Maybe including your crime analysts. Who's actually going to be interacting with this dashboard and utilizing it on a daily basis? The nice thing about the operations dashboard is that there is no requirement to know any sort of code or anything like that, although it is helpful if you do know HTML, because you can actually make some of these things look nicer. The one consideration for any sort of code that you have to make is when you're publishing this information, specifically with ArcGIS Pro, is that you're using the language that they've specifically made for deploying this stuff to your web interface, which is Arcade, which is the new one that they've come up with. So without further ado, let me talk about the first dashboard. So this is going to be a dashboard that we're doing for our current calls or active calls within the city. First thing I'm going to show you is our actual CAD screen. So this is what you would see if you're trying to see active calls or current calls within a specific area of our city, right? So I'm looking at our D sector of the city. These are some of the calls that may be actually happening there. So looking at this, it doesn't really tell you much outside of the information in reference to the address, the disposition, and when you click on it, you can actually see some of the call comments, but it doesn't display it visually or geospatially, so where you can actually make decisions of where these calls are. And it doesn't give you any sort of statistics on, okay, what's the actual time from receiving the call to the time of dispatch or to the time of arrival. So those are the kind of things that when I initially thought of what's the first dashboard that I can develop, the first dashboard that I can kind of put out there, and I thought calls for service would be a really good one to visually display some of this information. And let me preface, like, I'm the guy that's taking credit for developing these things, but it's a collective effort. It's people in your unit, people outside of your unit that are giving you ideas, giving you insights of what they want to see. So it's from me to my GIS team, to my manager, to the whole management team and the crime analysts as well. You know, we all work on these together. So going from here, the data is actually captured within SQL Server. So the CAD data is, from an analyst perspective, is a very ugly data. It's many different tables, from your officer table to your actual incident or call, to the actual comments coming in on the calls, to the disposition of the call, the signals. So all that on the left-hand side is what you see as the data is actually coming in. So the first step is, how do I pull that data over and create specific tables or SQL views that actually bring in the data that you want to display on your dashboard. So that's what you're seeing here. You know, specific fields that you want to see, from the incident number to the time of when the call was dispatched, to what type of signal it is, to what the source of the call is, addresses, locations, all that. From here is where you utilize the geo-tagged information that you have within the call. So you usually have an X and a Y, or in this case, we already have a shape field. So you can automatically map it within your ArcGIS Pro or your ArcMap environment. From there, you publish it to a feature class, whether it's on your ArcGIS Online or your portal. And this is where it becomes important, especially for something like this, where it's updating constantly. And we have this set via a store procedure that it updates every minute because it's active calls. So once you publish that information, then, like Chris was going over, you have an actual web map, and then you can develop a dashboard from there. So this is the dashboard of our current active calls within the city. Pretty simple interface, not a lot of interactivity, but it gives you the information that you kind of need as a zone commander within the city, or somebody in the command staff, or a lieutenant or a sergeant that kind of needs to know what's happening at this moment. So obviously in the center you have all your active calls, color-coded by priority. So going from red all the way down to purple for priority 6. On the right-hand side, you also have the counts of how many of those particular calls you have. And you also have indicators for each of the areas within the city. So we're broken down by zones, sectors, and subsectors. Sectors are called areas within our CAD systems. That's what we have here. And obviously, everything is interactive to where if you're a lieutenant over a particular area and you only want to see the K sector, you click on K sector, and that's what you're seeing within the actual dashboard. Going back to some of these other indicators, some of these other widgets that are included within the dashboard. On the top here, you have your response time. So without doing any sort of statistical analysis or anything like that, automatically you can see how are we actually doing within this given moment in the city to respond to citizens' calls for service. The second one is everything, including our priority 1 and 2 calls, so those most serious calls where you have to respond within a certain time. And given our standard, this will either be red or blue in reference to how we're doing at that given moment. Right now it's in red, so we're not doing so great, but we're always constantly trying to improve on that number, and that's what the sheriff kind of looks at to see, do we need to make any sort of an adjustment at any given time. Down from there, obviously everything is also interactive here. So if you, for some reason, you only want to see all your priority 3 calls, you will see that information. And then if you want to get into the weeds, the nitty-gritty of what these actual calls are, you can click on each one, get the information just like you saw in that SQL table that we looked at. You can also break it down by the source of the call. So if you're looking at only 911 calls, you can do that here. Or if you want to see only officer-initiated calls or only those coming in through our phone lines. And then on the left-hand side, you can also see kind of like what Chris had on his example is a running list of all the calls that are coming in. And if you sit here long enough, this will refresh every minute and you'll see new calls. You can also look at the details of each one, and you can expand on the screen to see the actual call comments for each one, and it's as simple as just scrolling through it to see if there's anything that you kind of need to read to be more aware of that particular call. So if you're, let's say if you're looking at as an analyst, if you're looking at a robbery series, and you always want to be mindful of if there's anything new coming in, you can quickly do a filter for a specific crime type within the actual dashboard so you can see those calls as they're coming in. And then you can visually display and actually read those call comments real time. So if we're looking at our 23s, and we're doing good because we don't have any at the moment. Let's use another example. We'll use a 10, so an auto theft. So let's say you're looking at an auto theft pattern. Let me see if this new call that just came in is something that potentially could be something I want to look at that given moment. And obviously, just like we looked at before, you have all the information from the actual CAD system available to you right there. And if you ever wonder if this information is actually being utilized once you develop the dashboards, firsthand experience that I have is definitely this is something that they will look at, and they will want to ask for more dashboards. One example of that is we recently had a re-election, and our sheriff was including some of these dashboards on his actual advertisement. So I'll play this, there's no sound, but you can see as he's going through it, he's displaying some of this information on his actual advertisement for his re-election campaign. So they do use this. It is a nice display. It gives them all the information that they kind of need at that given moment, automatically seeing everything that they need. Going back to some of the considerations that you have to make in reference to, how much space you may have on a ArcGIS server or whatnot, whether this is you doing this or somebody that you're working with that has, specific GIS experience or IT experience, there are a lot of considerations to how to make these things actually work faster. So some of those settings, these are things that you kind of, if you don't know about them, you'll find out pretty quickly, because if something doesn't run as expected, then you have to redo some reading and adjust some of those settings. Same thing going back to server space. These things consume a lot of memory, so this is a consideration that you also have to have. What sort of environment you have, and do you have to adjust that and ask your IT for upgrades or more servers to kind of spread that load a little bit as well. So the second dashboard we'll be talking about is our community walks dashboard. And our community walks is basically an initiative by our department for our sheriff, our assistant chiefs, our lieutenants, our sergeants, and sometimes VIPs from the city or other entities to go out into the community and engage with the community on walks. So they'll walk a couple blocks within a given neighborhood, talk to the citizens that live there, get some input from them, get some feedback, and we note all that information and we capture all the actual walks that have happened. So we've been capturing this information for quite a while, but early this year, or actually at the beginning of this year, we started a new SharePoint site to capture some of this. And it's basic information that we're capturing. Okay, what type of walk was it? What was the date? Who was the lead officer on that? Which zone of the city was it in? And the actual address. So we're capturing this information, and our IT department is bringing this information over to a SQL server so that we have it available for us to be able to visualize that information geospatially on a map. So from this step on is where we as crime analysis kind of take that function over. And I'm not going to take the credit for this one. This is one of the ones that one of our GIS team members, Kirk, developed, and he did a really great job on it. So I definitely want to give him his props for that. So from this SharePoint site, we take the information into our SQL server. And there's a Python script that Kirk developed that pulls the information from the original server that IT pulls. It geocodes that information, puts it into specific fields, aliases, so that everything looks nice and pretty on the actual dashboard itself. And it gives us what we need to actually map it, which is your shape field. And we also have a check on it that we run periodically to see from all the addresses, all the actual walks that are being input into the system, how many of those are actually geocoded. So if there are any, like down here, we have one. If there are any that haven't geocoded, we'll go in, we'll adjust the address in the actual SharePoint site. So next time the data updates, that walk can now be mapped in the dashboard itself as well. So this is what that dashboard looks like. And like I said before, this is not necessarily real-time data. This is something that updates every day, but it's really good information that you can display within a dashboard itself. Similar to the cost of service dashboard, everything is interactive. So as you zoom in and out, all your numbers actually adjust. So you can get really specific information and really detailed to specific areas as well. On the top left-hand side, we just have the total number of walks that we've had for whatever extent we're actually zoomed into. We have any upcoming walks. So you as an administrator or you as a member of the command staff can know where are your upcoming walks coming in, and do we need to develop or schedule any other walks in any other areas of the city. You have pending walks as well. So these are your walks that either they need to still go back on the actual SharePoint site and adjust from pending to a completed walk, or walks that have actually been scheduled for lieutenants, ACs, and other individuals that are actually conducting these walks. All these are interactive as well. So if you click on one of them, it will automatically filter out the map so you can see it visually of where that actual walk is or will be. And on the right-hand side, you have other filters as well. You can filter by walk type, by the zone of the city. You can filter to a more granular level to the actual subsector, or by month as well. And on the top of the dashboard, we also have those same filters, so you give your end users multiple ways of filtering the data if they need to, as in addition to doing a filter for time ranges as well. So if you want to see all the walks that have transpired within the last month, that's very easily done here by just inputting the date range that you actually want. And as with any dashboard, you can make changes to the mapping application. You can expand on the map so you can see everything better. You can zoom in. You can click on each individual dot, get the information about that specific walk. You can change the base map. So if you want to see imagery, so you can see exactly what part of the city and what neighborhood was being walked. And you can also do searches here. So if you want to search for a specific location, you search for that location, it will zoom you to it, and then you can see if there has been a walk within that specific area or not. And finally, the last dashboard that I want to show you is our violent crime dashboard. Now, this one was kind of an idea from our chief of patrol. He kind of wanted to develop something for patrol to be able to focus on specific areas, to focus on specific individuals via deployments and via specific strategies that we can kind of manage those areas and those individuals and be in the right place at the right time and talk to the right individuals. So this one is a compilation of a lot of different data sets, and that's the advantage of the dashboard, is that you can grab many disparate systems and many disparate databases and put all of them together into data that you can actually display and strategize with. So the data that's included in this is pulled from a SQL query. Let's see. There we go. And it's a very lengthy query, but basically what's happening here, it's pulling information for our top addresses and our top offenders for any sort of violent related crime that we may have in the city. We've developed a matrix to kind of do a numbering of these individuals so that we're focusing on the right individuals at that particular given moment. And then it's also doing a lot of filters for, is the actual individual a part of a gang? Have they been involved in violent crime? Have they been contacted recently? Do they have any sort of a connection to any other individuals, as well as we're looking at to see if they're actually been contacted recently or arrested recently, so that if they're incarcerated, they don't make it on the list, because there's no point in focusing on somebody that obviously is not out on the street. So the dashboard looks like this, and I've had to go in and anonymize it a little bit for the points for this actual presentation itself, so that we're not displaying people's names. But it still gives you an idea of what it's actually doing. So if you focus on the right-hand side here first, this is the side of the dashboard that actually focuses on locations or addresses or actual incidents itself. So you have a quick little gauge indicator here telling us how are we doing over the last 30 days in comparison to the previous 30 days. So obviously, if this is again in red, over the last month or so, we have had a few more incidents than we may have had the previous 30 days. You get your top addresses on the top here as well. So these are the addresses where we've had the most activity in reference to what we're actually capturing on the matrix, as well as you have a breakdown of each and every incident over the last year here. As with the cost of service dashboard, you can look at the details of each incident, and you can actually click on a link and go to the narrative of that. So you don't even have to leave the platform to read about that particular incident. You don't have to go into any sort of a SQL query or the actual RMS system to be able to pull that information out. It's all at the click of the button here. Everything is also interactive, so if you choose a specific address, your list will filter for only that address. The map will adjust to show you that address specifically as well. And the information that you can leverage here is seeing all the details in reference to that specific filter. You can also go down to a much more granular level if you want to look at only a specific zone. And by default here, the map is actually displaying the last 30 days of all our incidents that we're actually capturing for this particular matrix, or even down to the subsector level. So it's going to give you a really focused location of where you may want to focus your efforts. There's a lot of different options as far as what layers you can select. By default, we're doing the last 30 days, but you can look back at the last 3, last 7, 14, 90, or all the way back to the last 365. We also have historical areas in here. So this will tell you has there been any sort of a change for recent incidents versus your historical areas, or are they kind of consistent with what we've had in the past? If you zoom into one of those and actually click on it, it'll give you a little bit of information in reference to how many incidents historically you've had there, so you can get a good idea of how are we doing and why is that an area of focus, or is it still an area of focus at all. So let me go back to the citywide view here, and I will turn that off. And we also have information in reference to real-time crime center cameras. So that's an initiative here at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office recently, where we're standing up a whole unit that's actually managed by my manager as well. And we're going to be monitoring different cameras, you know, real-time crime with a 24/7 operation. So here we can leverage to actually see where some of these cameras may be, get that information off of them, and then potentially do a look up into some of those video feeds. And I really like what Chris had on one of his dashboards, is having, you know, a real live view of those cameras within the dashboard itself. And he had mentioned a geo event server, so that's something I will definitely be inquiring about to see if we can develop something like that in-house as well. The other portion of the dashboard itself, and something that can be leveraged in conjunction with your actual incident data, is your people section. And this is what the part of the dashboard that I've kind of anonymized, but you'll still get the general idea. So I'll turn off the incidents for now, and I'll turn on a couple other layers on here. So these are color-coded for our list of offenders that we're capturing within the matrix. So the red dots are going to be all the locations of the last known address for the individual. Your yellow locations are going to be all the actual incidents that are being counted towards that individual via our matrix. And finally, all the green dots are going to be all the different times that that particular individual has been contacted, whether it's any of those incidents that are already being counted via the matrix, or things like even their pawn transactions, because that gives us, you know, a potential location of where they may be living, phone numbers, and other information that may be important for investigations. So just like with anything else, individual number one here, if you click on it, your map will actually filter down to all the information in reference to that individual as well. So now you're seeing only his locations that he's been contacted in. And as you look through the details here, you would be seeing his actual information, so his name, his date of birth, his picture, which would also be interactive. You click on it and you can see his other arrests. That's something that I anonymized here. And then you can actually see what offenses we're counting towards his matrix. So you can see anything from aggravated battery to gang activity to robbery and so forth. And then you also see all his contacts. So whether it's pawn transactions like the customer data here, or if he was a suspect in something or a victim in something, to kind of give you an idea of where in the city he may be contacted. And you get a quick view of that simply by clicking on his name here. There are also filters for people, so you can do the zone of the city that those individuals have the highest influence on, and that just basically means what area of the city, which zone have they had the most contacts. So if you click on zone 1, it will filter down for the individuals that have had the most contacts in zone 1, but it also displays contacts throughout the city. You can do individuals that have an active warrant, so you click on it, and here I've also anonymized this. Typically you would be seeing the name, but you can see which individuals out of your actual list have an active warrant. And now you're seeing information for person number 10, and these are all his actual locations that he's been contacted, he or she has been contacted. And some of the other filters are, you know, individuals that are currently on probation. If there were any juveniles on the list, you can filter for them. And then you can also do a filter for which gangs or gang affiliations some of these individuals may have. So this is great, but then if you leverage this along with the actual incident locations and the heat map, now you can see, are there any specific areas of focus that maybe an individual is being contacted at a specific location, and you have recent activity there. Is there a possibility that either this person knows who may have done it, maybe associates, or maybe he himself or she herself could be involved. At least it's a starting point for your investigations, for your patrol to have something that they can leverage via the actual dashboard. And that's about it for me. Really appreciate your time, and I'll turn it over back to Chris.
Thanks a lot for that, Red. That's really exciting to see the ways that Jacksonville is utilizing operations dashboard to support a variety of different missions in the organization. Kudos to you and your team who've done really good work in trying to understand the needs that your various customers and users for these dashboards had in building them to those needs. I know we're running a little bit long on the webinar. I wanted to just provide everyone very briefly a couple of resources that are available to everyone out of this webinar. Just to recap, if you want to start building operations dashboards, you do need to have either ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, and you need to have a level 2 named user, which is a creator license or equivalent. And you also need to have if you're interested in learning more from a training or resource perspective, you're interested in looking at some of the demo dashboards that I presented in the beginning of this webinar, follow this link. We'll also put this out in a follow-up email, so don't feel too much pressure to jot this down, but esri.box.com/v/le dashboard webinar. And when you go to that site, you'll find a box site with a variety of links, including the PowerPoint presentation that I showed that has a bunch of other slides that I didn't show on how all that stuff works, a variety of demonstration dashboards, and links to some training seminars, help documentation, our forums around operations dashboard, and some great blogs that our product teams have put together that help you learn how to configure dashboards and make the best looking dashboards that you can. I also wanted to mention one last thing. If you ever see a dashboard that you're interested in, there's a way that you can reverse engineer it so you can understand how someone built it. So that works for any kind of public dashboard. So if you go to ArcGIS Online and you're searching through dashboards, you find a public dashboard that you like or any of the demo dashboards that I provided, you need to go to the URL of that dashboard and copy the app ID, which is the string of alphanumeric characters at the end of the URL. And then go to this particular browser link. And again, you have access to this in the follow-up email, this arcgis.com/app/ops-dashboard/index.html #new ?ID equals, and then paste in the app ID at the end of that, and it's going to prompt you to basically create a copy of the dashboard, but that copy will now be editable by you. So while you won't have the ability to edit the data, you can edit the configuration, which means you can go back and you can see how a particular element was configured so that you can understand how someone else put it together, and then you could tweak it a little bit to have it fit your particular needs, or you can just learn how someone put something together so you can use it when you go to build a dashboard. It's a really nice resource that's available as you're trying to understand how to make the nicest and most useful dashboard for your needs. This webinar is part of a larger webinar series that we do on public safety. We've got them coming in basically every month. We have new webinars for law enforcement, national security, emergency management, and fire. We've got a couple coming up soon. We've got a webinar on May 15th for learning about how demographic analysis in the ArcGIS platform can help for community risk assessment kinds of initiatives, and supporting real-time situational awareness in emergency management, so for disaster response, and some lessons learned from some of the work that Esri's done with emergency management users across the country to support situational awareness when a disaster occurs. That website, esri.com/pswebinar, is also where you'll find all of the recordings of all of our past webinars, including this webinar, in about a day or so once that goes up online. All of those are available on YouTube. I have already kind of gone through all the questions that that came up in our chat, so I know we're running long, so I'm just going to kind of pass through, but say, hey, if you did have some additional questions for either myself or Rad, please feel free to give us an email, and we're glad to answer those questions for you directly. Thank you everyone for attending. We hope you found this session on Operations Dashboard useful. Thanks again to RAD and to Jacksonville Sheriff for showing the great work that they've been doing. And everyone have a nice day, and I hope you have a great weekend.